Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. As the financial advice landscape changes, it's important to embrace new technology to enhance the way you run your business. With change comes your chance to use advanced technology, reshape your client experience, and see wealth differently. Netwealth is here to support you on this journey by providing you market-leading technology, excellent customer support, and expertise to help your business thrive. See wealth differently. Visit netwealth.com.au to learn more about how Netwealth can support you. Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and we are continuing our series on technology and innovation. And today we are covering off on how people, advisors, businesses are using technology and innovation as part of their business strategy, and understanding how their strategy or the preparation that they put into this plays a part in the technology that they're choosing, and when and where and how. So we look forward to getting stuck into this episode. Welcome back, Patrick Flynn.
Great to be back.
Now we're talking all things around business strategy, and so let's. I'm going to kick this one straight over to you. What are your thoughts?
So when it comes to business strategy, yes, there's a lot that you can do, and look, all I can get to for the purposes of today is really one core driver. So where we are at Simply Kaizen, we really specialize in incremental change, or that continuous improvement, and there's two parts to that. So one, there's just taking a look at, some small changes that we can make on a short-term time frame in a small business that should be something you can implement in a week that will make things better. And if you do that, as the saying goes, if you pursue perfection, you'll fail, but you will achieve excellence. That can be really cool. But if we don't have a long-term view that is attached to that, it may end up having us going off in the wrong direction. So to adapt the Bill Gates quote, you might be making an inefficient process more efficient, but you're still just magnifying the inefficiency. So what I always recommend is taking a leaf from Stephen Covey's habit number 2 of beginning with the end in mind. And to put a bit more of a structure around this, there's what's called the McKinsey 3 Horizons model, which many of you will have probably seen in different capacities over the years. But essentially, it's to say, let's think of Horizon 1, 2, and 3 of growth for the business. And if we see Horizon 3 as being our end goal, where we've gone through some transformative change and things are very different, that might be in an advice context. We've got, some more advisors, or we're multi-office, or, we've got a client portal, and, we've got full digital engagement, or whatever the case might be. That's where you want to be in that third horizon. That might be 3 years away, might be 5 years away. It just depends on how ambitious you want to be. Then you skip back to the first horizon and look at, okay, that's all great, but what do I need to do right now just to survive? I need to adapt to enhanced FDS. I need to meet all of our new DDO and other requirements. There's stuff I've got to do right now. So Pat, just calm down on the client portal stuff. I just need to, stay compliant and, be able to legally operate. And then Horizon 2 would be the stepping stones to get us from one to the other. Now, the reason why I cover that off is because when we think about that in terms of incremental changes that we still want to make, we still want to improve things today. If we know where we're going, then we can frame everything that's small that we want to do right away in terms of that. So if you want to say to your team, hey, everyone can make a small change to this process. We want to engage everyone in the team. We want everyone to spend 2 hours on a Friday afternoon trying to make next week better. That's really cool. If you want to do something in that, then maybe the team members can do it themselves, or maybe they, provide a Kaizen suggestion box, which is not just about, the coffee tastes terrible, or can we replace the lighting in reception, it keeps flickering, which may be valid points, but it might be saying, hey, we want to get to Horizon 3. Horizon 3, our focus is on digital client experience, or our focus is on profitable, low cost to serve. So if you're going to have a Kaizen recommendation, then you need to frame it in terms of those things and how does this recommendation help us get towards those things. So if you want thinking about making changes to your business, transformative change is very expensive. It's very disruptive. It might not be something you want to do. You're thinking about doing incremental change, but you're not quite sure how to do it. I'd begin with the end in mind. Plan out the changes you want to have to the business in 3 years, what you have to do now, and the stepping stones in between, and then frame everything that you do and every process improvement that you invest in as being something that helps you get along that way. Because, for example, you might say, you know what, we really want to invest in our SOA process. Our SOAs are too inefficient. But then the business goal is, hey, we actually want to outsource this over the next couple of years. Don't invest in improving your SOA process. You're going to outsource that by the time you get to Horizon 2 or 3. If you're going to say, hey, I really want to rework my fact find, but I also want to get to a digital fact find, then can the work on this awful PDF and just stumble through, even though it might be painful now, because there'll be another win you could focus on that'll be continuously relevant to you in Horizon 3.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at having, and I also like what you said about bringing your staff along the journey. I think it's important to, with any particular, strategy that you've got in place and any change that's taking place, that the stakeholders, which AKA the staff that are involved in implementing the change, are on the journey.
Oh, there's, look, I call it the consultant's free kick. When I go into a practice, I do a couple of surveys for staff typically. One is a confidential survey and one is a not public, but, visible to management survey. And a lot of the time, the ideas I take and help a practice implement comes straight out of those surveys. So somebody in the business has already said the things that I say, and management tend to listen to it more from me. So if you want to save money on consulting fees, there's probably something that your staff has already told you to do, and you probably just need to do it. Now, sure, maybe you need some extra helping hand and you can give me a call if that's the case, but there's probably some really good wisdom from the people that actually do the stuff that you do that's in there right now.
Yeah, fantastic. Patrick, thanks so much for coming on this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the final episode when we talk about the evolution of technology and innovation.
Thanks, Fraser.
Welcome back, Hayley.
Hi, Fraser.
Thanks for joining us. We're talking about some of the different business strategies that we put in place. Now, you mentioned already that the fact how you segment. Just want to go into a little bit more depth about that segmentation process and how you come up with these things.
Yeah, so this largely came about by identifying problems, to be honest. So every fortnight we have a roadblocks and challenges meeting, and it's the team's opportunity to flag any client situations that they're finding challenging. And we found some common themes, and they were relationships with power of attorneys. They were clients that had language barriers, people that didn't have an email address. So once we identified each of those segments, we then realized, let's get that information into the CRM and highlight that these people are a variable to the standard process, and let's build out what the process should be for those people. What it meant is we spent less time focusing on actioning the process for the people that are just the standard, and focused on enhancing the process for the people that do need a bit more involvement. If there's a vulnerable client, I do need to take extra steps to engage with them. And it's about making sure that that information is in the CRM, because if it's just in my head, if I just know, oh, look, Joe's really hard to get a hold of, but I know at 3:00 every Thursday his daughter's home and that's when he answers the phone, that doesn't help anyone else within the business if it's just in my head. So we spent a lot of time making sure that the team knew to capture that information and put that in the CRM so that we could segment that way, as opposed to over 65, millennial, family, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, all these different points that are important to segment, not just their age and, the standard demographics or how much money they've got in super, but understanding these little things that make a difference. Talk to me about the roadblocks and challenges meetings. You mentioned they were fortnightly. Tell us a bit more about that meeting.
Yeah, so that's been really effective in helping us have incremental innovation. So I pride myself in working really hard within the business to help us keep growing, but not too fast. And I think by taking a second to look at what are the roadblocks we're facing, what are the challenges we're facing, and that can sometimes be with product providers. Because we work virtually, I don't know who is hitting their head against a wall over a small problem they're having with the product provider or a client. So this meeting really allows us to come together. We all have different backgrounds when it comes to approaching that particular roadblock or challenge, and we then could use that to work out how to solve that problem.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, solving problems, and I'll get back to the incremental change thing in a second, but solving problems is often, sometimes you look at the problem and you go, well, this is actually, it's a problem because it's causing our client a problem, but it's not our problem to solve. How are you working with those product providers to say, hey, this is a problem, can you fix this up?
Oh, this is the good thing about having a good CRM. So one problem we were having is our team was spending 50 minutes on hold to product providers. Understanding COVID has made challenging situations for everybody, but our CRM allowed us to pull out which providers were the most notorious. We went to the BDM and said, this is not good. We cannot service our clients with it being like this. And obviously they can't go and just, hire 10 more employees, but that feedback goes back to them and goes back up the chain. And it definitely does that because I've got the information to prove that that's the case. They know that people have to be on hold, but if I can say 5 of my staff were on hold for 3 hours in total over this week, that has weight. So that's made a difference. But you're right there. We've got a long list of roadblocks and challenges, and you have to filter through the things that are just people frustrated about something versus something that we can have change over. And by having that meeting, it does allow us to filter through that process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're able to, quantify and qualify the cost of the providers providing a poor service.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with follow-ups. I mentioned before beneficiary nomination forms. It feels like it's gotten worse. And the consent process hasn't made it any easier. And that was a real opportunity for product providers and advisors to come together and go, what is best for the consumer? What is best for these people? How do we uphold the profession here? And that, I don't know that conversation happened. And, this roadblocks and challenges meeting that we have, that just gives us more ammunition's the wrong word, because I'm not against product providers. I want to work with them, but it's becoming increasingly frustrating that they're innovating things that aren't really helping. Like, it's great they've got digital signatures, but the signature is an old format of identification. So like, why aren't they looking at 2-factor authentication on forms? Why aren't they looking at the selfie identification? There's just so many other things they could be innovating, and they're just not focused on that area. They're focused on, but we have an app, but what does it do? But you can look at your balance, but what does it do? That meeting allows us to draw those things out and debate, is this an issue or just a frustration?
Yeah, it's certainly. And I guess when you think of it from a small business point of view, the strategy sort of has to be towards using those providers that are actually going to make your life easier and your client's life easier and more efficient and more effective.
Yeah. I think the hard thing as well is when you look for problems, you'll find them. And because our business focuses on incremental innovation, it can be hard to not get distracted and see but if we fix this, then it could fix these 10 other things over here versus, but this is a cool idea. So it does mean there can be an element of overwhelm, but the benefit for us has been, as soon as someone identifies that they're doing the same thing more than 5 times, it gets added to that meeting and we create the automation and it's done, move on. So it does allow us to be very efficient with our time.
Yeah, incredible. So you're absolutely right, because a lot of this is around prioritization, because like you said, if you look for problems, you'll find them. How do you go about that prioritization process to say this is quite an important thing we need to fix. Let's fix this one before the others. Yeah,
largely it's benefit to the client. Ultimately, it's got to get back to that. There are cool things that we'd love to do that would make our lives easier. But whether that impacts the client, that's probably the priority. But we focus on the things that are also achievable. Me whinging about forms isn't going to actually do anything until I can put some data together to show someone that can make that change happen. Whereas me putting together a video on how to complete that form, that has instant impact. for the whole team and for the client. So it's a group discussion. It's a group vote. Sometimes there's issues that hang around for ages because we keep coming up against roadblocks. I mean, I've talked about the power of attorney process. We've gone to the ends of the earth to find out what our obligations are to approve that that document is legitimate, to approve that I'm allowed to speak to this person. And there's just so little information out there. It makes me worried. What are other advisors doing? I'm sure they're just going, oh, they said they're the power of attorney. Sounds good. You know, even the product providers, I asked one of them, I said, can you tell me what you do when you get this document to know it's all okay? And their response was, we check that it's certified and then we just put it on file because we wait to see if anything goes wrong. It goes through the courts. If this has been mishandled, it's through the courts. Like, that's not that doesn't seem okay. You know, I think if we are becoming a profession where we're to be held to this authority, then that's an area that is grey right now. And I'm only inquiring about it because I want to do right by the client, because there are situations where people take advantage of that. So, and, you know, this is the stuff where you can have all the tech in the world, but it doesn't solve that problem.
Yep. Now with this incremental change, how do you then prioritize the systems and the resources and the people and the time towards creating these pieces of innovation versus, you know, because we're all busy, you get busy doing your other stuff. Do you have set times or set people that just work on it?
Yeah, so it's largely myself being the ops manager and being a person that just thrives off of systems and processes and enhancing things, you know, making things the best that they can be. But it also helps that I work with Peter, who is just across so much of this stuff. So we work really well together. It is hard not to focus on that stuff when you've got 14 reviews to do. So it's something that you have to allocate time for and stick to that, because when you find yourself in a rabbit hole of a new tool, it's hard to step out of that and focus on the other work you've got to do. But it's at each point asking yourself, if I dig deeper, how will this benefit the client? How will it benefit the business? I think one tip I can give people when researching apps or any tech, a failing that I had was I would spend time researching an application, discovering all the cool things about it, diving into how it would help us. And I never documented any of that. And then I'd come across a reason why it wouldn't work for our business or why we wouldn't adopt this technology. And I never documented that either. A year would go by and I'd go, oh, I remember that. I'd started to look into it. Let me look into it again. And I would do the same thing. I've just wasted my time when I'd already identified why we wouldn't use that. So if you dive into or do some research into a piece of tech or changing a process, document that. Even if it's a audio file, a screen recording, something that you can refer back to that helps you, stops you in your tracks before you dive into that rabbit hole again.
Yeah, amazing. You love a good pros and cons list, and especially if it's you talking about it for yourself, it's pretty believable next time you go back and look at it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Hayley, thanks so much for coming on. We look forward to catching you in the next episode.
Thanks.
Welcome back to this episode, James.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
What are we up to? I can't even remember.
We're in episode 4. We're episode 4, business strategy, and we're talking all things around obviously innovation and technology. To do with sort of business strategy, we're sort of stepping back a bit and looking at working on the business in this particular episode. What are you seeing advisors doing really well with stepping back and working on their business?
Yeah, well, I before I answer that question, I think they've been inundated with compliance and regulation change at the moment. Assuming they've got through that, I think that finding out where their markets are up to and concentrating on their markets is probably the biggest key. If you know what your market is and everything that you do is targeting to that. I was talking with one advice firm in Melbourne, not that old. They do mid to large high net worth clients. They need a client that I think they said 2 million plus of FUM, and they have got more work than they know what to do with. So, but they've got roadblocks. So now that they're trying to now slow down a bit to be able to move forward. and they're looking at how can they make their tech more agile so that they can actually get the advice to these clients. Because the expectation with a client like that is that the advice is going to be of high quality. And and I asked them at one stage how long it was taking them to get an SOA out, and in some instances it was 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yes. And they're looking to change that. They desperately want to change that.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the concept of stepping back and just slowing down and then working on the strategy. Obviously there's been a fair run on the last sort of, let's say, most of 2021. There's been it was running to the financial year, then it was running to the October changes. There's been a lot of running. At what point do you step back and then look at your strategy from a business planning point of view?
Yeah. What does the step back mean?
Yep.
You're right. And I think you've said it quite nicely. Is we've all been running. Doesn't matter what's been happening. It feels like the last 18 months or so, we could have had the opportunity to actually step back, but there hasn't been the opportunity because of all the things that have been happening and the expectations of what clients' needs are. Businesses looking at falling over. What do I do now? Can I change my plans? Can I change my goals? Can I retire earlier or can I retire later? And that's been a theme that I've seen come through as well. So I think agility with advice firms as being the key. When do they take time to step back? It's just how do you tell an advice firm to step back and before they move forward?
Yeah. Now, a lot of firms are specialising these days. They're either specialising in a particular, say, product set, or they're specialising in a particular, demographic of client. How do you see that being? Are we most of the way there? Are firms mostly on that journey, or are some still got a way to go?
I think some still have on the way to go. I think that there are definitely advice firms that are specialising in specific markets. So we could rattle off a few that are doing that. Those that are not actually specialising in specific markets are actually having advisors inside their firms that are the specialist. The risk specialist, the retirement specialist, the aged care specialist, business succession specialist. So that they're actually, for want of a better word, funneling their new clients to those particular advisors that have the skill set to be able to manage that particular type of client. Definitely. And I think the generalist is just going to get it, other than the relationships they already have. From a growth standpoint, I can't see a generalist growing their business to large levels if they haven't got a singleness of purpose.
Yeah, exactly right. So if they're specialising in, I don't know, doctors who run their own practice and do this, and this, and do these other things, and then they can just help those particular people with, generally what they look, all of their needs. But
yes, yeah.
Fantastic. Talk to us about the prioritization process, because a lot of the time, that when it comes to business strategies, it's nice to be able to do everything, but you can't do everything. How have you seen firms turn around and go, great, we've got 48 things we need to do. How do we prioritize?
Well, the sales part of me says, produce the advice and get the advice out. The compliance part of me says, make sure you get all your systems and processes in check. So, and there's that juggling act, Fraser, isn't there, where you need to do the advice process in a systematic way to be able to make sure that all of it's done properly. But you've also got to get the advice, dare I say, out the door in inverted commas. Because nothing really happens until the advice gets out the door. So there's absolutely there's this constant juggling act about what do we do. So the quicker advice firms can get their systems and processes in place, the way to monitor and supervise all those different aspects of advice, then knowing that's in place, then they can start to work on getting that advice out quicker. But I think you're just going to get the advice out quicker without looking at how the advice has been created using systems like the X-Plans, etc. of the world, then they're just going to be creating problems for the future.
Yep. Now, when you're seeing technology in a business, are you looking at sort of start from scratch type stuff, or are you just looking at small incremental change when it comes to businesses?
It depends on the firm. I think some we can make small incremental changes, but invariably it's bigger when you're doing a discovery type, where's your tech stack up to, how you're managing. It's like, oh yeah, our tech stack's not too bad. We've got a bit of this and got a bit of that. So how are they talking to each other? Oh, they aren't. Are you happy with that? Well, for the time being, we are. But so it's kind of like, as you drill down, you find out that the tech they've got is more of a put up with than utopian what we need. So, but as I said, it's because you've got to keep moving forward. You can't make those large changes quickly. Changing from a hosted Xplan site to an own Xplan site, that doesn't take days. That takes weeks, and in some instances, or many instances, takes months. So you can't, as much as you'd love to say, let's switch from one to the other, you just can't.
Yeah, what should be a small incremental change you're saying is actually a large piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And needs to be planned. How do we do it? What do we pull off first? Do we run them both in parallel? Do we extract that data from this process and put it into that application or whatever it might be?
Yep, fantastic, James. Obviously a lot to cover in the business strategy side of it. Thanks so much for coming on to this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the next one.
Pleasure.
Welcome back, Cara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Fantastic to have you back. We are talking about technology and the business strategy around implementing or bringing in or changing technology. Tell us about your business. It's a bit more established. It's not exactly a brand new, or you haven't started from scratch again.
Yeah, so I guess TWD is about 12 years old now. However, Troy, who is the founding partner, some of his clients he's had for almost 20 years. So when it comes to change and trying to improve on inefficiencies, we really like the idea of a big sweeping change and starting from scratch, but I guess we've kind of accepted that it's just not practical for our business. There's sort of too much history and too much legacy from there. So I think it's more about making some incremental changes, getting some small wins along the way, and just trying to, improve the efficiency side of things as we can. I think there's some cool technology where, from like say Salesforce, for example, we came across a little while ago, and we almost got really swept up, with some of the changes from there. But, I think technology can certainly improve things, but advice is a hard game, and there is so many different nuances. I don't see from the complexity that our business is sort of sitting in that we can just use technology to get rid of all our problems. We sort of certainly can use technology to improve things, but there's always going to be some complexities. There's always going to be some manual stuff, just because every client situation is different. And when you're dealing with things that, go back 10 or 15 or 20 years, you need to kind of honour that, the bespoke nature of the type of advice that we give to our clients as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that change being hard, and change, the advice is hard, the change is hard for the advisors and the team, but it's also, and what I'm getting at from your comments there is it's reasonably hard for some clients as well to, if you're biting off a bit more than they can chew.
Oh, definitely. I guess, we've had a lot of, let's call them change projects over the years where we've changed providers or changed technology, and, it's almost like a step-by-step phase, speaking to clients about it, getting them comfortable, getting them on board, transitioning across, dealing with the queries, and sometimes you learn a lot about the client, what they're willing to, to tolerate and what they're going to blow up about, and being able to kind of manage those expectations is really important when you're dealing with change, and just managing the team as well. I think, advice isn't just, going down one path. That's why it's advice. We're assessing each person as an individual and working out what is the best way forward for them. And, you might have two clients there that look very similar, and you might end up getting them different advice for very nuanced and particular reasons. And I think that's why it's just so hard to rely on technology completely or sort of assume that technology is going to solve all of your problems, because it's just not that simple. I think every time you design a process and you go, yep, tick, 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 this is going to happen exactly like that. And then the first client that comes along and you try to work through that process, you go, oh, well, what about this situation? What about that? And there's just so many little things like that, I think, when it comes to working with people, that you just need to be adaptable and just have a really robust process where you can use technology as much as possible, but also just, be able to use some common sense at times as well. And, with phasea and all of the things that are coming in, at the end of the day, we're the ones that are responsible for making sure that our clients are better off, when they walk out than when they came in. And, we can't just, rely or blame technology if it doesn't go exactly as we want. We really need to control that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Taking control. Tech expectations can definitely get up there once you've seen the shiny demo, how things work. But I think you're right. It comes back down to what problems have you got, and understanding that there's going to be a whole lot of what ifs that you didn't quite know about through the process. Speaking of process, do you have a process for implementing sort of new technology in your business?
I guess the process would depend on the technology as such, but I guess we've generally gone for, I almost maybe phrase it as a slow rollout, doing some testing with a few members of the group, getting comfortable, working through some issues, building a bit of a Q&A or a bit of a worksheet of what hurdles we might come across, and then rolling it out to more of the team from there, and I think in that sense, I'd certainly put our hands up and say, we're not perfect. I think that, some things that we've rolled out within the business have gone quite easily. And then, you're just always going to get those people in your team that don't like technology or don't like change or don't want to adapt. And, we've got a team of 30 people, and, there's just, sometimes I've been surprised by the people that resist and the people that embrace it. But, again, I guess sometimes you just need to work with the team. You just need to be patient and ultimately be available as well. What really frustrates me sometimes is when people go, okay, this is what we're doing and it's happening regardless of whatever people's queries or comments on. We need to kind of really take people on the journey and make them feel comfortable and give them the tools that they need, the training that they need, the guides that they need, the time that they need to adapt to the change, most importantly as well. All of this stuff, sometimes it's taking a big step back to take a couple of steps forward. So we've got to give our team the ability to do that.
Yeah. I had this visualization of dipping your toe in the water nice and slowly, test and measure, then roll it out slowly, rather than just getting everyone to dive straight into the deep end.
Sounds good in practice, and then sometimes when you start rolling it out, you come across some other issues as well, and you need to go, oh, okay, hadn't thought of this, or hadn't come across this. Let's make sure we factor that in and adapt, and again retrain and refocus.
Yep. Now you've just been through a process of changing some of the software in your business from to Netwealth from another platform.
Mm-hmm.
How did you make the decision to change?
It's been a really long road to get to this decision. Like, I would literally say we've been toying over this for years. We went through a bit of a sort of technology platform change maybe 3 years ago, and I guess we just realized we weren't getting the outcomes as a business that we wanted. And so we've been almost resisting the Netwealth change since then. And then finally, at the beginning of this year, accepting that ultimately we need to, from a process point of view, from a compliance point of view, we need to become more efficient. We need to outsource some of the portfolio work that we were doing, and that, a solution like Netwealth is really the answer. They are doing this, they're doing it well. Obviously it's a cost, and I think that's a factor, and that's been something that we've had to really review client by client as well, the cost of moving across. And for certain clients where, say, Netwealth had been more expensive than what we were using previously, we've adjusted our fees. to make sure that it's, in the client's best interest, and that we can, both give the client a good experience, make it cost effective, and then also make it effective for our business too. So, it's been a really big process. It's taken us a long time to just make the decision around it. And we're about halfway through that transition at the moment. So we're right in the thick of it. We talk about Netwealth multiple times a day, every single day. We've sort of regularly have hurdles that we come across that we're just dealing with, and just, looking forward to being on the other side once we've kind of worked through this change, worked through all the transition with the clients. And then, then we can really get the efficiencies that we've been sort of battling with for as long as I can remember.
Thank you so much, Cara. We will catch you very soon in the next episode.
See ya.
Welcome back, Matt Heine.
Thanks, Fraser.
We're talking about business strategy in this particular episode. Obviously, it's something that you'd know a lot about, running a large company.
Indeed. Look, business strategy is clearly something that we're pretty passionate about, and one of those things, and it's an old adage, if you don't plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, let's talk about advisors and their strategy. There's obviously a lot of different things we can talk about when it comes to this. Obviously, probably the first one is making sure that they actually, as you just said, have a plan.
Absolutely. I don't know the recent statistics, but I remember when we used to do work with some of the consultants, it was generally about 50% or less that had done a business plan within their business. Now, that makes it really hard to grow a business or to implement many of the things that we're talking about, particularly when it comes to tech. And without sort of digressing and talking about tech again, I happen to know that off the back of our advice tech research that we've done recently, that those firms that are doing really well with their tech adoption and getting the results from their tech, a very high percentage of the advice tech stars have a roadmap, they have a plan. Some of the better ones are actually looking at 24 months and have a dedicated person to actually implement that plan, and they're seeing some fantastic results. So now business strategy is much broader, but it was an interesting observation.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And we are focusing. We do want to focus a little bit more on the technology and innovation space. I like the idea of the roadmap conversation, though. It sort of makes it a little bit more exciting than just a plan.
Yeah, well, you need to be deliberate about your technology roadmap. It's very easy to spend a lot of money and to get very limited returns. And I think that's where when we speak to advisors, they get disappointed and they sort of lose focus on it. They're not seeing the benefit, and they're not understanding why they need to keep spending what we think was around $10,000 per employee on the various bits of technology that don't integrate within their business. So you do need to have a plan. Doesn't mean that the plan can't change. A plan should not be something that you sit around a board table and agree at the start of every financial year and then file away in the bottom drawer. A business plan needs to be organic. It needs to be regularly updated, and it needs to be something that you keep referring back to, because I think there's one thing you can guarantee about a good plan, and that's that it should and will change before the end of the year.
Yeah, it's almost like it should be. And $10,000 per employee is an interesting number, and we'll probably explore a little bit more where that came from. But this is really around a continual process of having some structure in place to be able to think about your technology and to understand where it's going and what problems it's solving.
Yeah, so I think there's a real challenge between trying to look at or understand the latest, shiniest bit of new tech and having an appreciation for what that tech might actually do for your business, either from an efficiency back office perspective or from a client engagement perspective. So being really clear on what the intent is or what the problem is before going and trying to find the solution to it. Because as we've touched on before, you will end up disappointed, or you'll find that you're paying a lot of money for technology that's not being used or delivering on what you thought it should.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, tell us about that process of looking at what the problem is and going out and finding a solution. What are you seeing within the some of the advice tech report of some of those those businesses that are doing really well, stars?
The stars. Well, as I mentioned, that they're obviously putting a plan in place. We've touched on in one of the earlier episodes the fact that data is really important. So we're seeing a lot of advisors, in fact, the expectation over the next 2 years that 90% of these advice tech stars will be implementing a integration technology to manage their data better. But that then leverages into all of the rest of their business strategy. So we're seeing once they've got that data and they're able to do a deep dive into their practice analytics or into their client base, they're starting to think about pricing discussions. They're starting to think about how they can automate a lot of the back office services. But ultimately, it's about how do we deliver, or how do we reduce the cost to service our clients so that we can obviously either increase our margins or reduce the cost to the client, and how can we potentially look after more clients? And they're two really big questions that the industry is really grappling at the moment. And to suggest that technology is the answer for everything is just misguided. It is a whole of business transformation in many cases, and that takes time and effort and commitment from the business. When we think about at Netwealth, our own business planning, typically it's about a 5, in some cases 6-month process, and you really do need to thrash the ideas out. And for what it's worth, the way that we manage our business planning and strategy planning, we get together as an executive team. We all come to the table. We identify and look at some of the trends that are happening in the market, both locally and overseas. We then come back with a list of things that we think could be interesting to consider. It's a big, long shopping list, and there's 8 executives on the team, so it's sort of 80 shopping lists, if you like. And a lot of that will be around efficiency, a lot of it's around new product, a lot of it's around consumer changes. And then we start to whittle it down, and we try and make sure that we can resource not only what we call lights on, so what are the things that we have to do to stay in business, which is sort of your regulatory and legislative work. What's business as usual? So just to keep the business ticking over, and sort of tactical changes to product and service. And then what are our big strategic initiatives? So the things that are really going to drive us forward or differentiate us in the market. So working through all of that and then making sure you've got the resources and the budget to match it is a challenging process. It means that as you get down to the pointy end, you do have to be quite fierce around what stays and what goes. And there'll be different ways that you can sort of prioritize within your business what sort of makes the cut. Within our business, we look at things like, well, is this change or this strategic initiative going to benefit one client or one client segment or all of our client segments? Is it going to differentiate the product in the market? Is it going to drive efficiency? Is it going to drive new revenues? And you can quickly see which items tick off against a number of those different items. So coming up with a bit of a scoring methodology as you work through that business planning, we think is really important. Once you've actually agreed on what it is you're going to work on for the year, and you've worked out that you can actually afford it and that there's budget to either resource up or to invest into new technology, implementation really is then what it's all about. So how do you start to make these changes? And the best advice that I can give is break it up into really small parts and just start ticking off things and seeing incremental change. Because if you try and focus on really big sort of multi-year projects, it's very hard to get focused and to deliver on the important milestones.
Yeah, that's a really great way of looking at it. And as you say that, I'm trying to try this on from a small business point of view. Obviously lights on and BAU is. I kind of feel like there's been a lot of that over the last sort of 12 months or so. Everybody's just trying to keep the lights on and business as usual with all the changes going on. But those strategy initiatives, that section, to me, that's the exciting part as well. That's where you see real innovation going on. I think, and as you said, that market leading type environment, and it really just come back down to the appetite, I guess, of the individual business to say, is that, where we want to be? Do we want to just be in the lights on and BAU, or do we want to actually, improve in the market and start implementing these some real initiatives?
And I think the challenge in this day and age, and we've talked about this a lot, is the world is moving really quickly. So we're seeing changes in the industry, which has gone through a huge upheaval over the last 3 years, particularly post-Royal Commission. We're seeing changes in consumer behaviour. We're seeing changes in technology. Advice firms, or any business for that matter, can't afford to stand still in our view. You need to be, now it doesn't need to be huge changes every year, but you need to be thinking about what the next 2 to 5 years looks like to make sure that you can set yourself up for success, because businesses that don't change or aren't thinking about these things risk being not relevant and not existing in the future.
Yeah, now you mentioned that prioritization process of knocking your shopping list down from and being prepared to say not yet for some things. How do you, apart from the lights on BAU and type of things, how do you prioritize what you are going to work on and what you're not?
Yeah, it's probably the hardest part of any business. And you mentioned before, how do you boil it down to a small business? It doesn't matter if you're a small business, medium-sized business, big business. Everyone has the same challenge, which is there's too many things we want to do, not enough time and not enough money. So that prioritization process is critical because you want to basically make sure that at any given time, you're working on the most valuable thing. Now, the most valuable thing will change depending on if you're the advisor, the back office staff, the power planner. So it's about making sure that as a business, you can all agree on what is the most important thing or things that we can be working on at any given time. So we have a couple of different ways that we sort of manage this, but we really do sit around a big table once every fortnight and we debate it. And everyone sort of throws in their 2 cents worth on why they think something should be more important than something else. And I think it's a really good process, and it means that you can bring the team together and you can get everyone aligned. We look at things from a size perspective. So is this going to be a 6-month job, a 12-month job, or is it something quick and easy that's going to have a big impact? And because it's very difficult to know exactly how many months or weeks or years something's going to take, we use an agile terminology. So we talk about T-shirt sizes. So everyone can sort of picture, if something's an extra large, they get that it's a big project and that it might not be the right thing to be trying to tackle right now, all the way through to a small. For the more tactical items in the business, we start to look at, and we often have this, we do this exercise with our clients as well, is what you're asking for or is what we're proposing, is it a must-have, a should-have, or a nice-to-have? Now, clearly you have to do the must-haves first. The should-haves are pretty important, but there might be an argument from time to time where the nice-to-haves actually move ahead of the should-haves for a new market segment, or you've seen you've identified an opportunity that others haven't seen yet. So working through those two sort of processes, and then within that, assigning things a 1, 2, or 3. Over time, you start to narrow the list down, and the better ideas and the things that are going to be very valuable rise to the top.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Now, how important, you mentioned the round tables, how important is that to get as many different stakeholders or voices at the table as you can from your customers or your clients through to, through to the person who's, processing the whatever it might be, all the way through to, like somebody who's a managing director?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. As much as I'd love for all of my ideas to get through, the business wouldn't be in nearly as good a shape if that was the case. So I think having different stakeholders, having different voices is fundamental. I love the idea of having the client voice at the table. So sometimes it might be that you actually allocate that role to someone in your business. So there is a person that turns up to each meeting with the client's cap on, and they are the client advocate. Or it might be that you actually get a client or a client representative into those meetings to understand what their perspective is or where they're coming from. But really important, you get representation from across the whole business. It helps bring the team along, and it makes sure that you are working on the right things.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on this episode. We look forward to rounding up the series with a discussion on the evolution of technology and innovation. We look forward to catching you in the final episode.
Thanks, Fraser.